The United States has just been completely blocked in Latin America, and what has happened in recent weeks will forever change the balance of power on the continent. While Washington thought it had full control over its southern neighbors, a secret alliance was forming right under its nose. Mexico and Colombia have just made a move that left American strategists in panic. And the most impressive part is that it all happened in coordination with the BRICS. If you want to understand how a brilliant geopolitical operation is completely changing the game in Latin America, stay with me until the end of this video. What you're about to learn here will shock you because it shows how countries long considered allies of the United States are now working together to create an insurmountable barrier against American influence. If you like content that reveals the backstage of international politics, leave a like on the video to support the channel. It all started when Gustavo Petro, Colombia's president, made a decision that took everyone by surprise. He sent 25,000 soldiers to the Catatumbo region on the border with Venezuela. For those unfamiliar with the area, Catatumbo has always been a troubled region, dominated by drug trafficking and illegal armed groups. But here's the crucial point. This was not an isolated action by Colombia. It was a coordinated operation with Venezuela, and Nicolas Maduro made a point of publicly thanking this historic decision. We're talking about two countries that had tense relations for years and suddenly decided to work together in a way no one expected. What makes this situation even more interesting is that we're not just talking about military cooperation. We're talking about a complete shift in geopolitical strategy in the region. Venezuela mobilized another 15,000 soldiers to the same area, creating a combined military force of 40,000 men guarding this strategic border. Maduro did not hide his enthusiasm for this partnership. During a military ceremony, he said it represented a historic step in binational coordination. More than 1,000 new Venezuelan fighters were sent to the border zone that stretches from Táchira to La Guajira. The message behind this action is very clear. Venezuela and Colombia will no longer face each other as adversaries. They are now uniting to defend their borders against external threats. And when we say external threats, we're not just talking about criminal groups. We are mainly talking about pressure coming from Washington. While this was unfolding on the border, something equally important was taking shape in Mexico. Claudia Sheinbaum's government took a very firm stance in defense of Venezuela, declaring that no country can be subjected to blockades or unilateral sanctions. This Mexican position is not merely diplomatic rhetoric. Mexico is the second largest economy in Latin America and one of the United States' main trading partners. When a country with that economic weight takes a clear stand against American policies, it completely changes the game. Mexico has become a strategic bridge between Latin America and the BRICS. This means that Venezuela now has a political and economic outlet to bypass the sanctions the United States tries to impose. It's as if they have built a new escape route that Washington cannot block. Mexico's entry into the BRICS was a devastating blow to the American strategy in the region. Suddenly, the United States found itself in a situation where it cannot pressure Venezuela without entering into direct conflict with Mexico, a very important neighbor for them. But it gets even more interesting when you understand what is happening behind the scenes. The BRICS are not just a group of countries that meet to talk. They are actively building an alternative to the financial system controlled by the United States. Russia and China have already invested heavily in Venezuela's oil industry and have supplied the country with modern military equipment. With Mexico now part of the bloc, that influence multiplies exponentially. If you're noticing how this story is more complex than it appears in the mainstream media, leave a comment below telling us what you found most surprising so far. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, take the opportunity. This content always brings the in-depth analyses you won't find elsewhere. The situation on the Colombia-Venezuela border is especially important because this region has always been used by the United States to justify its interference. They claimed they needed to act because of drug trafficking and armed groups. But now, with 40,000 soldiers from two sovereign countries controlling the area, that excuse simply no longer works. How is Washington going to justify an intervention when the very region is being patrolled by legitimate military forces from internationally recognized countries? That is the genius of the move. Petro and Maduro turned an area of instability into a binational military fortress. What used to be a chaotic border is now a military bastion coordinated by two governments that decided to work together. And don't think this was improvised. Petro, who in the past had criticized Venezuela for not doing enough against irregular armed groups, understood that a common strategy would be far more effective than squabbling with neighbors. On the Venezuelan side, Maduro desperately needed regional allies, and this partnership with Colombia came at the perfect time. He did not hesitate to turn this cooperation into a major political triumph. The coordination among these countries does not happen in a vacuum. Behind this entire operation is the growing influence of the BRICS in Latin America. The bloc is consolidating strategic ties with key countries in the region, offering real alternatives to American dominance. What should worry Washington most is that every attempt at economic pressure against Venezuela now runs up against new commercial channels opened by the BRICS. Every military maneuver in the Caribbean faces a coordinated political military front in the region. The Pentagon had put all its chips on sending ships to the Caribbean and imposing financial sanctions to suffocate Caracas. But reality is showing exactly the opposite of what they expected. Venezuela's military muscle is growing, cooperation with Colombia strengthens by the day, and Mexico is providing significant diplomatic cover in international forums. The United States is being forced to step back. They cannot justify a direct intervention when the border is under the control of two sovereign governments. They cannot break Caracas economically when the BRICS open new routes for financing and trade. And they cannot politically isolate Maduro when countries like Mexico present him as a legitimate player in the region. The situation becomes even more complicated for the United States when you consider that Colombia may be preparing to formally join the BRICS. This has ceased to be a mere rumor and has become a serious debate in Bogotá. Gustavo Petro is clearly aware of the multipolar turn the world is undergoing and has opened the door to much greater cooperation with the BRICS bloc. The military alliance with Venezuela on the border may be only the first sign of a much broader strategic shift. For Colombia, integrating into the BRICS would mean access to financing alternative to the IMF and the possibility of opening its exports to giant markets like China, India, and Russia. Politically, it would mark a definitive break with Washington's historical dependence. Imagine the symbolic impact of this change. Colombia would move from the role of unconditional ally of the United States to key partner in an emerging bloc that directly challenges American hegemony. Colombia's accession to the BRICS would not only reinforce the positions of Venezuela and Mexico, but would also consolidate a Latin American axis capable of completely redefining the balance of power on the continent. This possibility must be keeping Washington's strategists up at night. For decades, they considered Latin America their private backyard, where they could intervene whenever they wished. Now they are seeing a regional alliance take shape that can effectively block their influence. What we are witnessing is a historic turn in the region. The military cooperation between Venezuela and Colombia, coupled with the diplomatic and strategic backing of Mexico and the BRICS, marks a turning point in Latin American history. What used to be a fragmented region under external pressure is beginning to build a common front, an effective shield against interference and external hegemony. For the United States, accustomed to steering Latin America's fate, this is a truly frightening scenario. For the first time in a long while, regional unity is translating into concrete facts. Coordinated soldiers on the border, effective bilateral agreements, new, robust economic alliances, and a shared narrative of defending sovereignty. The military ceremony where Maduro celebrated the graduation of new fighters was not just a protocol event. It was, in fact, the celebration of the start of a political, diplomatic and military blockade against the United States. A blockade that arises from the heart of Latin America and finds an echo among the BRICS giants. The phrase that circulated throughout alternative media was devastating. United States blocked, and even if Washington does not openly acknowledge it, the reality on the ground shows that its room for maneuver is shrinking drastically by the day. Venezuela is no longer alone, and Mexico and Colombia have taken a step that completely redefines continental geopolitics. The question that hangs in the air is, how long will the United States be able to hold out before accepting that the era of its absolute hegemony in Latin America has definitively come to an end? This transformation has implications that go far beyond Latin America. If the BRICS can build a block of effective resistance in the United States' own backyard, it sends a powerful message to the rest of the world. Other countries facing American pressure will look at this example and realize that there is a viable alternative. They will see that it is possible to resist Washington's intimidation when you have the support of a solid economic and political alliance. For China and Russia, this development in Latin America represents an immense strategic victory. They have managed to establish a significant presence in a region traditionally dominated by the United States without firing a single shot. The BRICS soft power is proving far more effective than America's hard power. While Washington tries to intimidate with warships and economic sanctions, the BRICS offer advantageous trade partnerships and technological cooperation. This difference in approach is making all the difference in the end result. Latin American countries are choosing cooperation over intimidation, and that is rapidly changing the region's geopolitical map. If you've made it this far and want to keep receiving in-depth analyses of these geopolitical transformations shaping the world's future, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Also, share this video with people interested in international politics, because this kind of content needs to reach more people. What we're seeing is not just a regional change, it's the harbinger of a global transformation. The world order established after World War II is being systematically challenged, and Latin America has just become the laboratory for this new reality. The coming months will be crucial to determine whether this regional alliance can consolidate itself definitively, or whether the United States will find a way to reverse the situation. But from the signs we're seeing, it looks like the Latin American bloc, backed by the BRICS, is here to stay. The era of absolute American hegemony is coming to an end, and we are witnessing the first chapters of a new multipolar world order. And you've just seen how it all began on our own continent, right here in Latin America.